It's here. Hello everyone, Glack the Geek here, welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're continuing the ranking series of Doctor Who with Series 5. And before we get started, there's one thing that you'll be bound to asking. What's this? I've moved house, that's the answer. Yeah, it's quite nice here, quite nice and peaceful, but a lot of my stuff is still in boxes stacked, so it's literally just the clapboard. But you know, I've got a few things set up. So as you can see, I've got my DVD collection set up. I've got a few figures lying about. I've got my calendar with Tennant there in September. Speaking of, we've moved past the Tennant era, we've moved past the RTD era, and we're now on Stephen Moffat's era with Series 5. So this series was a massive change for the show. It was the first season for Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor, and the first for Stephen Moffat as showrunner. And there was so much change in this series, you know. You've got new Doctor, new companion, new showrunner, new TARDIS, new titles, new screwdriver, new Daleks, new feel for the show. It was more fairy tale, more whimsical, and that's the approach that I prefer personally. I love that sort of fairy tale vibe you get from Moffat's era, and especially from Series 5. I have said this before, but Series 5 is my favourite series of Doctor Who. I don't think there's a single bad episode. I think the low point of this series is like a 7 out of 10. That's how good it is. I mean, I absolutely adore it. It's brilliant, and yeah, no wonder I decided to get it on Steelbook. So, let's rank all episodes in Series 5 from worst to best. Geronimo. I don't have the screwdriver with me, so that's why I can't do that. Number 10, The Beast Below. Now, I gave this story a rewatch the other week, and I found it a flawed but enjoyable story. The idea of Starship UK is such a creative concept, you know, being obviously flew by the Star Whale. It's such a cool concept, you know. Matt Smith is fantastic. He's got the quirky moments, but he's also got the dark moments near the end when he finds out what's going on. I think Liz Ten's quite a cool character and one of Moffat's better female characters. And it's just a nice sort of... It's just a nice story, you know, and it's a great sort of first adventure for Amy. Yeah, there are a few plot holes, and the stuff with the end with, like, the Doctor's just like the Star Whale, you know. It is a bit, you know, hammered home a bit too much, but it's still an enjoyable story, and I don't see why Stephen Moffat apologised for it. If anything, I'm waiting for that hell-bent apology, mate. Moffat, where is it? Number 9, Victory of the Daleks. Again, we've got another quite underrated one here. First half is fantastic. It obviously takes cues from Power of the Daleks, the second Doctor story, but adds its own little flair to it, you know. It's different, you know, it's set in World War II, in the bunkers, and you've got Winston Churchill, who's brilliant in this. And the Daleks, they're so scheming and cunning and, you know, pretending to be nice. And there is a reference to Power of the Daleks with the I am your soldier line. It is a reference to Power. And you see the Doctor truly angry. Matt Smith is phenomenal in this, you know. When he's beating the Dalek with a giant spanner, he just lets it out and it's properly intense. However, the main reason people hate the story is the Paradigm Daleks. For me, I don't mind them. I think they are better in Asylum with like the metallic colours, but for me they're fine, you know, I don't mind the designs. But I think the main problem that comes with the story is in the second half, it gets a bit sort of wishy-washy. The Daleks don't really do much, and they're just sort of, yeah, they don't really do much. But it's still a fun episode, and I mean, me and my family were watching Doctor Who during lockdown, and this was one of my parents' favourite episodes, and I can totally see why. Number 8, The Lodger. Coming off the back of Vincent the Doctor, this story was going to pale in comparison, but it's still a fun story. I've talked about this story in one of my Guilty Pleasure videos, but I just enjoy it, you know. I do love sitcoms, so stuff like Red Dwarf and Friday Night Dinner, and to see Doctor Who do its own sort of sitcom episode was really cool, you know. Matt Smith and James Corden just have that dynamic which works for a comedy kind of episode, and it's just a nice feel-good story, you know, nothing to take too seriously, but it's just fun. Number 7, The Vampires of Venice. Again, just another solid, fun time, you know. It's not one that I find myself revisiting often, but when I do, it's a ton of fun to watch, you know. The locations are lovely, and, you know, Venice. The villains are really cool, quite creepy in places, quite atmospheric as well. Matt is obviously quite funny in this. And this is Rory's first proper trip in the TARDIS, and it's great to see Rory join the TARDIS team with the Doctor and Amy. My only real criticism of the story is that, it turns out that the villains, obviously, they're not vampires, they're aliens, of course they are. And it turns out they're fish people. Fish people is not the best you could come up with. Yeah, but other than that, it's still a fun story. Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. Now, as much as I give Chibnall a lot of flack, I've got to give him credit where credit's due. This is actually a pretty good story. Now, yeah, it is a bit of a rip-off of Doctor and the Silurians, and while it's nowhere near as good as that John Pertwee story, it's still a fun watch, It's nicely paced at 2 parts. Matt Smith's great as the Doctor, obviously. I'm glad that they brought the Silurians back, and obviously I do like some of the moral stuff, and it's like, I quite like it. And there's quite a few elements in this, with like the boy going missing and his mum trying to find him, which feel quite reminiscent of what Chris Chibnall would later do with Broadchurch, so there's that as well. Number 5, the Pandorica opens and the Big Bang. Now, this is a really good finale, and it's a lot different to Russell T Davies' finales, You don't need the Daleks taking over, or the Master, or Gallifrey coming back. It turns it inwards and outwards, and it's a lot more complex, but I love it. The first part is just epic, you've got all these different villains, in the idea of all these monsters, like, the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Sontarans, the Jadoon, the Sycorax, and even the Hoyts from Love and Monsters, coming together to just this once, just to take down the Doctor. It's such a great idea. And, a prison for the Doctor in the Pandorica is so cool, And then you've got the setting of Stonehenge, which is really cool. It's got lots of little returning things from the series. And, you've got the Doctor's speech at Stonehenge, which is just fantastic. And while the second part is a bit of a cop-out with its resolution, it still tried something different. It was going for the more sort of complex route. It was trying to take it inwards. And even though it didn't quite work, I can still respect it for that. Number 4, The Time of Angels, Flesh and Stone. This 2-parter is just brilliant. The first part is genuinely unnerving and quite creepy, You've got soldiers getting killed off by the Weeping Angels in quite gruesome ways, Getting their necks snapped, having their subconscious, that ripped from there. It's really just nasty stuff without being graphic and showing it. This is also the first time that we saw River Song since Series 4. And, seeing her with Matt and Karen Gillan, it's, great stuff to watch. And considering it was the first story that Matt Smith and Karen Gillan filmed, they just slip into their roles effortlessly. If it wasn't for the Weeping Angels moving and some of the story arc convoluted stuff near the second part, this could have been at the top of the list. It's incredible. Number 3, Amy's Choice. I've already discussed why this story is so underrated, but it is fantastic and needs more love. The whole concept of the dream world is so interesting, and it's so... And again, it's very fairy tale, and it's so surreal as well. The scenes in the little village are really creepy with the old people, and then the stuff in the TARDIS, it's genuinely intense, and you don't know whether they're going to survive or not. The Dream Lord is such a slimy, wormy villain, played brilliantly by Toby Jones, and I would love to see him return to Doctor Who. It's a great character piece on this Doctor plus companion plus third wheel relationship that this TARDIS trio has, and it really puts it to the test, and I love it. Number 2, The 11th Hour. Easily the best modern series opener and the best post-regeneration story in Doctor Who. Matt Smith just hits the ground running after, David Tennant leaves. He hits the ground running, He does the wacky stuff of walking into the tree and eating fish custard, and that's great. But he's proactive throughout the story, making you fully believe that he is the Doctor. It makes things fresh, The Doctor's companion dynamic with Amy, it's a lot different because she knew him as a child. The cracking time arc, the whole feel of it just feels so different, but it's still Doctor Who-y, enough. And the I am the Doctor scene on the rooftop gives me chills every time. When we were doing the global watch along of this, I was having an absolute blast. Number 1, Vincent and the Doctor. This, The Empty Child, and Genesis the Daleks are all fighting for the title of my favourite episode ever. This episode is just perfection, written by Love Actually and Blackadder scribe Richard Curtis, bringing us a beautiful depiction of Van Gogh's final days. Tony Curran's performance as Van Gogh is outstanding here, and the amount of abuse he goes through is just horrible to watch, and the Doctor and Amy are just phenomenal in this. A lot of people complain about the invisible monster, but that's the whole point. It's a metaphor for depression, and depression is something that only Van Gogh can see, because that's what it's about, Depression isn't something that's tangible, and that's what works about it. That ending scene is just it always has me crying every time. Van Gogh seeing that his life is appreciated is just so hard-hitting to anybody. And Matt Smith's good things and bad things quote is something I use in my own life. So if you're going to say it's overrated, which is fine, but if you are, you're going to need a really good reason to convince me.